This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support on GunGuyTV. I'm super grateful for everything that you do. Please do check us out on our alternative places for videos. You'll find them listed right here. You'll notice that we put Gab and MeWe up there, and the reason for that is that we're no longer on Facebook or Twitter. I've jettisoned both of those. They are big tech censor people, and I don't want to be part of that, so we moved to Gab and MeWe instead. You might subscribe to one or both of those. I do post every day, pretty much, Monday through Friday, and try to keep you up to date on what's happening around the country with Second Amendment news and other things that pertain to your freedom. All right, also check us out on the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast, if you wouldn't mind. It's an audio podcast. You can listen to it in your car or wherever, and you'll find it at your favorite podcast player. Okay, what am I talking about today? Because of all the new shooters that are out there, and there's millions of them, I've been getting a lot of emails and requests and like that for basic stuff, which is why I did the holster video that I did, I think, a few days ago. And this one I want to talk a little bit about some basic rules for safety, because with all the new shooters out there, we've got to make sure that we're safe. So I'm going to give you the 3 NRA safety rules, and I'm going to explain them for you so that you understand exactly what they mean. Now, there are other rules. Jeff Cooper came up with a great set of rules, and then I've modified those, and different instructors do different things with rules, okay? And if you want to put them in the comments and get snarky about it, go ahead. But I'm going to do the NRA rules because they're super simple and they're really easy to remember, because they all start with the word always. So the very first rule is this: always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction requires a little bit of discussion, because we have to first define what constitutes a safe direction, because it's not always what you might think it is. I've stood in front of many classes over the last 20 years and asked them, what's a safe direction in this room? And I get a bunch of different answers. Typically, people will say down. So I've got a blue gun here. It's just a piece of plastic. We can point it anywhere. That's all it is, okay? I take my little blue gun and I point it down. I say, okay, is that safe? Now, sometimes people will say yes. Sometimes people will say no. Sometimes people will just sit there because they're afraid to answer the question. And so I'll ask them, and I'll point it real close to myself down toward my feet and say, is this safe? And of course, they look at the fact that the gun's pointed at my feet and say no. So first of all, let's define safe direction as being something that isn't pointed at yourself, pointed at your own anatomy, whatever part of it might be. It does not constitute a safe direction. But does down and away constitute a safe direction? Well, down and away is what you want to think about down, not just down. Down and away may be a safe direction as long as it's not away toward other people. So if you're standing on concrete, down and away may cause that round to bounce off and go that way or go whatever direction. So you have to be conscious of the people around you. Likewise, down is not always safe. If you happen to be in your house and you have a 2-story home, you're in your bedroom upstairs and below you is the kitchen and there are people down there, down may not be the safest direction in your home. That also applies to places like hotel rooms and that kind of stuff. We'll talk about hotel rooms here in a minute. But what about up? Is up a safe direction? Well, the same thing is true. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Up can be safe. It's safe where I am. I'm inside my shop. There's nothing above us other than the attic in the shop, the roof in the shop, and then just air. And by the time this handgun bullet goes through the attic, all the things stored in the attic, and if it managed to get through all of that and actually hit the roofing material, it's probably going to stop in the roofing material. So a handgun is not going to make it through all that stuff. In fact, I doubt very seriously a rifle would have much spit on it by the time it went through. So standing where I am right now, up with a handgun or a rifle or a shotgun is going to be a safe direction. However, it's not always a safe direction. Outside, in a major metropolitan area or populated area, up is not a safe direction with a handgun or a rifle, because that projectile goes up, and like the old rule the old rule still exists. What goes up must come down. As a matter of fact, my dad was a deputy sheriff, and he was shot in the back, right back there, by a young boy who was shooting at birds about 2 miles away with a .22. The bullet went up, and it came down, and it hit my dad. And he never got it out because it was too close to his spine, and back in the early 60s, they just didn't do that. They were afraid to fiddle around in there without crippling him, so he carried it until the day he died, and he used to jokingly say he was never able to get the lead out of his butt. Now, the thing that was really frightening about that, though, is the fact that I was with him at the time, and I was standing to his right. He was hit on the right hip. I was standing on his right, and the bullet hit just about head high when you went and looked at me as a little boy. So had the bullet been about a foot to the right, might have hit me in the head, hit me in the neck, and it could have killed me. So what goes up comes down. Remember that when you're outside, particularly in a populated area with a handgun or a rifle. Now, birdshot will go up and rain down. Many times as a duck hunter and bird hunter, I've had shot rain down on my hat. Is it a little dangerous? Yes. Can it get in your eye? Yes. But is it going to puncture you? No. A slug? Yes. Birdshot? No. So with birdshot outside, a shotgun may be safe, depending on, again, where you are. And then right, left, front, back, all depends on what's in that particular direction. So one thing I want to impart to you is that no specific direction is always safe. Up is not always safe, down is not always safe, right, left. The only place that's always safe, really, is when you're on the range and there's nobody downrange and the gun is pointed downrange toward the targets. There you go. If that's the case, then whatever happens with that round, it's going to hit the berm or whatever the backstop is, and it's not going to harm anybody, even if you make a mistake. But what I want you to think about now is whenever you have that gun, think about always is the word, always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Now, somebody's going to comment, well, yeah, but what if I'm defending myself? Okay, well, let's stop for a second. If you are defending yourself, you're fighting for your life or the life of another person, pointed at the bad guy constitutes a safe direction. It's just not a safe direction for the bad guy, and that's fine. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, point the gun at the bad guy, but be careful of the people around you. You don't want to point it at your friends. And then you also have to be concerned about where the bad guy is. That's why there are other rules that talk about knowing your target and what's beyond it. Now, I would say, know your target, what's beyond it, and what may pass between you and it. And I don't hear too many people talk about that because in pandemonium, people are running all over the place. If you're defending yourself, you have to be aware of everybody around you, and that's really, really hard. So be aware of your surroundings. But that gets well beyond what we're talking about here. The first rule, let's just keep it simple, is always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Now, you're not always going to be able to do that if you're carrying a gun or you're traveling with a gun. I carry a gun everywhere I go, and I do travel from time to time. So when I travel, I take this with me. I actually take this with me all the time. This is just a backpack, piece of backpack armor. I bought it, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and I buy a new one about every 5 years because that's when the warranty runs out, and I just throw it in my laptop case. And no, I don't put it in there so I can hide behind it if somebody's shooting at me, although I suppose that's an added benefit. I put it in there because if I'm in the hotel room, I put it on the bed, because in a hotel room, that direction may be another hotel room, and that direction may be another hotel room, and there might be a room above me and a room below me, and maybe that direction is a hallway, and on the other side of the hallway is a hotel room, and that direction is the pool. Or perhaps across the pool, there's another hotel room. So there really is no safe environment inside a hotel or motel. So I take this with me, and I'll put it on the bed, and that's where I will unload and load my handgun. I'll do it with it pointed at the bed. And that way, if I have a discharge that's negligent discharge or accidental discharge, this is going to stop the bullet. It's not going to go through the bed and hurt somebody in the next room. This is my permanent safe direction. If I'm in a place where there is no safe direction, I manufacture one by taking this out of my laptop case, setting it on the bed, and now I have a safe direction to load and unload my firearm. Now, there's a lot more about safe direction we could talk about, but I think you get the basics of it. You want to really give safe direction some serious thought. Now, there's 3 rules I'm going to give you, and always keep the gun pointed in the safe direction is the #1 rule. And if you were in a class, I'd ask you, why is that the first rule? And I've had classes give me all kinds of answers, but somebody will eventually say, because if you screw up all the other ones, nobody gets hurt. And that's exactly right. The reason why always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction is so important is that if you mess up all the other rules and the gun goes bang and it's pointed in a safe direction, the only thing that gets bruised is your ego and your ears are ringing. That's it. Nobody else gets hurt. So first and foremost, always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Now let's talk about rule #2. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you've decided to shoot. This rule, always keep your finger off the trigger, requires a little less discussion than always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, but it does require a little bit. Now, before I get into that, let me let you know that there is a little bit of bonus footage at the end of this video that you're not going to want to miss. So I do think you want to stick with it all the way through. All right, always keep your finger off the trigger until you've decided to shoot. Now, the NRA rule actually says always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. I say until you've decided, only because from the standpoint of a guy who's a law enforcement instructor and security instructor and concealed carry instructor, by the time we've decided to shoot, we're facing a deadly threat. So it's not a matter of being ready to shoot. Being ready to shoot is just having the gun on target and absolutely being ready physically to shoot. But making that decision to shoot is an entirely different thing. So I'm going to say, if you don't mind, I'm going to alter the rule and say, keep your finger off the trigger until you've decided to shoot. And the first word is always. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you've decided to shoot. So your trigger finger should look like this, not like this. I see people do this all the time where they've got their finger on the trigger guard. Don't do it. Get your finger up here where the frame meets the slide if you're carrying a semi-automatic. The reason for that is that guns are ergonomic and your finger is meant to go in here. So if you've got it riding alongside the trigger guard, your finger's probably going to end up in there at some point or other. Here's another reason. If I'm teaching a class and I've got a long group of people on the range, then I want to be able to see, or I want my range safety officer to be able to see, looking down the range from one angle or down the range from the other, whether fingers are off the trigger or not, before I have them do the next thing, whatever that may be. If I've got a bunch of right-handed shooters and I'm on the right side, I can look down the lane and I can see all the fingers are off of there. And even if you put your finger down here, I can tell that it's off of there. But if you'll notice, if your finger is on the opposite side of the gun from me and it's like this, at a distance, it looks like, or may look like, depending on the length of your finger, that your finger is in the trigger guard. And I'm going to stop the class to make sure that your finger is off the trigger. Whereas, if your finger is up where the slide meets the frame, I've got a clear view right through the trigger guard, and I know your finger's nowhere near that trigger. So I advise you, keep your finger up where the frame meets the slide, and get in the habit of putting that finger there every time you stop shooting. So if you're shooting, bang, 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 and you decide to stop for a second, make sure that finger's up there. If you just want to fire one shot, bang, then get that finger back up there. And make sure that finger stays up there until you've made the conscious decision to shoot. Now, it looks a little different with a revolver. With a revolver, you want that finger up where the frame meets the cylinder, okay? Same idea. You can see all the way through. If I'm on the other side, you can see all the way through, but if I got my finger down here, it's going to wander in here, or it just looks to the instructor or the range safety officer as if I'm not being safe at that moment. So keep your finger up there where the frame meets the cylinder, and you've cleared that, okay? So keep your finger up in those spaces until you've decided to shoot, and the rule is always do that. Always, okay? So we've got rule number one. Always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. We've talked about safe direction, and I got some bonus footage for you at the end. And then we've talked about always keep your finger off the trigger until you've made the conscious decision to shoot. Now, the third rule is a little different, and that one does require some explanation. The NRA says always keep the gun unloaded until it's ready to use. This rule requires a little explanation because it sounds nonsensical. Wait a minute, this is my home defense gun. What am I supposed to do? Not load it until the bad guy's standing in front of me? And I would just say, no, that's not what the rule means. But if the gun is not something you intend to use at that moment, or it's not your home defense gun, which you've got set up for that purpose, you just have it in the safe for storage, or you're at the range and now everybody's called for the range to be clear and you're going to walk down range and change your targets, then unload the gun. The gun should not be loaded unless it's ready to use. And certain things constitute ready to use. Carrying it, having it as your self-defense gun, being at the range and shooting it, hunting with it, those all constitute ready to use. But when you take a break or the gun is no longer under your control, particularly hunting, I've seen many guys take a loaded rifle and lean it up against the tailgate of their truck. Unload the rifle before you lean it up against the tailgate of the truck or before you set it down anywhere. Unload it, clear it, set it down. I'm fully aware of a shooting that happened over that with two identical rifles and two brothers, where one brother picked up what he thought was his rifle, pointed it at his brother as a joke, and said bang, and pulled the trigger and killed his brother point blank range. Okay. So this kind of stuff happens. Now, obviously, was it pointed in a safe direction? No. Did he have his finger on the trigger? Yes. Was it loaded when it wasn't ready to use? Yes. Did he violate all three rules? Yes. Okay. But it happens. So this is why we have these rules in the first place, and that's why I wanted to bring them up. All right. Here it comes, the bonus footage. Okay, I promised you some bonus footage, and then I'll have some final thoughts at the end. You'll notice if you look at the table, I've had the blue guns, but I also added a real gun at this point. And this is so that I can show you something that does occur on the range a lot. Now, fortunately, the majority of the time this happens, nobody gets hurt. But every once in a while, somebody does get injured, and there have been instances where people have been killed. So it's important to understand this. This goes along with that first rule of always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. So I want you to imagine that I am standing at an indoor range and I'm facing the target. And to my left, there are people over here shooting, and to my right, there are people over there, and we're all standing in our lane, and we're shooting at our target. What you'll see is someone might have a semi-automatic pistol, and they shoot for a while, and then when they're done shooting, they want to unload the pistol. They'll press the button for the mag release, take the mag out, and then they'll go to rack the slide. And for whatever reason, sometimes it's they don't have the hand strength to rack the slide and keep the gun pointed downrange. Sometimes their hands are too small and they can't reach the slide stop to lock the slide back while having the gun pointed downrange. And so they'll take the gun and turn it this way to rack it. Now, the problem with that, obviously, is I ask you to imagine that there are shooters over here. Now, I've seen people do this left-handed and right-handed, so sometimes it's pointed over there, and sometimes it's pointed over here. I'm right-handed, so that's the direction I went. And then, of course, they'll try to rack the slide and lock the slide back, and they'll fight with it and fight with it and fight with it, and sometimes they'll point it at their own feet, sometimes they'll point it at the ground, sometimes they'll point it at people over here. But the point is that it's not pointed in a safe direction, which is downrange. Most of the time this is done, people are fine, nobody gets hurt, but it is a little frightening, and it does scare range safety officers to death, and they'll come and grab you and maybe ban you from the range if they keep seeing you do that, or you don't quite get it. So let me explain a better way. All right. Since we're human beings, we tend to want to take objects that we're working with. I mean, it might be anything. It could be this flashlight, or it could be whatever I have in my hand. It might be these reloading dies and this set, and I want to, oops, I'm dropping things, and I want to look at it. I might turn it to look at it or turn it upside down. That's what we do as human beings, because we like to be the hub of the wheel, and we move things around us. When you're dealing with a firearm, you want that firearm to be the hub of the wheel, and you want to move yourself around it, not the other way around. So rather than turning the gun to look at the controls because you don't understand them, maybe you rented a gun, or turning the gun to look at the name, or turning the gun to rack the slide or whatever, don't turn the gun, turn yourself. So if that's downrange and this is where everybody's shooting, if you cannot rack this slide and lock it back and keep the gun pointed downrange, as I just did, for whatever reason, fine, that's okay. Turn yourself. Now rack the gun. Don't turn the gun, turn you. Move your body so that the gun stays oriented safely downrange. So I'll show you again. If you can't do it this way, that's perfectly fine. I do it that way. Some people can, some people can't. It's okay. That's all right. If that's the case, turn yourself and then rack it so that the gun stays pointed safely downrange and nobody on either side gets hurt. Okay, some final thoughts, and yes, a little homework. What kind of a teacher would I be if I didn't give you some homework? It'll actually be kind of cool homework. All right, here's the final thoughts now. I want you to take what I just taught you and apply it to your video watching, because that will help you cement these things in your memory. Always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you've made the conscious decision to shoot, and always keep the gun unloaded until it's ready to use. Now, if you stay on whatever video platform you're on, particularly if you go on YouTube, and you search for accidental gun shootings at firearms ranges, or accidental shootings at gun ranges, or whatever, you're going to find a whole long list of videos, news stories, and so on that you can watch. I encourage you to watch those. In particular, I encourage you to watch the ones where the actual closed-circuit camera footage of the incident is available for you to watch. And then ask yourself some questions. just about the shooter. Did the shooter have the gun pointed in a safe direction? Well, if there was an accidental shooting in which someone was injured, the answer would be universally no. Then ask yourself, did the shooter have his or her finger on the trigger? And I'm going to tell you that the answer is universally yes. So there's two rules broken right there. The gun's not pointed in a safe direction and the finger is on the trigger. Now the third rule, was the gun ready to use? Maybe the answer is going to be yes and the answer might be no. It all depends on the circumstances. So sometimes accidents happen like that when the gun is ready to be used and should have been loaded. Sometimes it happens when the gun isn't ready to be used and shouldn't have been loaded. I'll give you an example. There is a video you might stumble on where there's a guy and he's shopping for a gun in a gun store. And the clerk, the gal, gives him the gun to look at, and he's looking at it, and he's got it pointed over here like this. He's looking at the gun. It's pointed over here. And oh, by the way, there's some customers walking around right over there. And he holds it with his finger over the barrel, and he presses the trigger, and he blows the end of his finger off. The gun was taken from the display counter. Was it ready to use? The answer is no. Why on God's green earth did a firearms store, a gun store, have a gun in the display counter that was loaded? I don't know, but they did. And there's an example of the gun not being ready to use and the rules being broken. It wasn't pointed in a safe direction. He had it pointed at other customers. He put his finger in front of it. Remember I said pointed at any part of your own anatomy does not constitute a safe direction. And he had his finger on the trigger and he pressed the trigger reflexively and he blew his finger off. And he could have hurt or killed the patrons that were just walking around over here. So that's a situation when all three rules were broken. Now, I do want to remind you, if you keep the first rule in check all the time, always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, and you screw up the other two, nobody's going to get hurt. All that's going to get bruised is your ego, and your ears are going to be ringing, okay? And you're going to be embarrassed, and that's it. But try to keep all the rules. If you do that, you'll be able to enjoy the shooting sports, you'll be able to have a gun for self-defense, and you will never have an accident that injures anyone. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful week, and wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.